Hey everyone,
I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to Latin America Diaries. I woke up at the end of the world in Punta Arenas and made my way towards the airport to begin the long journey north. And although I had technically been further south in Ushuaia, this point really started to feel like it was the beginning of my return journey through Latin America back towards the point where it all began in Mexico. And it was also the beginning of a journey on a road that would form much of the backbone of my travels over the following few months. That is the Pan American Highway. This is the road that stretches almost the full length of the American continents. From here on, I would be tracing parts of that route northwards. I flew from Punta Arenas to Santiago and then crossed the city to the bus terminal, where I boarded a coach for Viña del Mar, where I was met by my dear friend Pato. He's originally from Chile, but now lives in Australia, and by sheer luck, he happened to be visiting family in Chile at the exact same time that I was there. He picked me up at the Viña del Mar bus station and then took me back to his family home in Concon, a small town just to the north. That evening, we headed down to the beach to watch the sun sink into the Pacific Ocean, something that as an Australian I had never really experienced before. Here on Chile's coast, watching the Pacific blaze orange and gold before darkness fell, it was really something special. The major city in this region is Valparaiso. It is Chile's second city and one of the most historically important ports on the Pacific coast of South America. For generations, it prospered as a crucial stop for ships rounding Cape Horn between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But the opening of the Panama Canal changed everything. Suddenly, many vessels no longer needed to sail the long route around the southern tip of the continent. Later, the growth of more modern ports such as San Antonio further reduced Valparaiso's strategic importance. And so, over the past century, Valparaiso has experienced periods of economic decline and social hardship. And yet, what remains is something extraordinary, because out of this fading grandeur has emerged one of the most fascinating cities in Latin America. A port city spilling over the steep hillsides, colorful houses stacked above one another, stairways and alleys wrapped in murals, poetry, politics, and street art. It feels chaotic, creative, and weathered and alive all at once. Today, Valparaiso is considered one of the world's great centers of street art and also one of Chile's centers for culture and nightlife. So Pato and I headed in for the day to explore what makes it so special. When we arrived, we were greeted by the famous coastal fog rolling in from the Pacific. You might remember a few episodes ago, I think it was when I was in Peru, I talked about the Humboldt Current. It's the ice-cold ocean current that runs up this side of South America that affects the climate all along this part of the continent. That affects the climate in Valparaiso as well. That sea fog, known locally as the Camanchaca, drifted through the port and curled around the hillsides, appearing and disappearing like theatre smoke through the city. We met up with a couple of Pato's friends who were instantly welcoming and so warm and fun, and we all went out for a lunch at a restaurant on the hillsides of Valparaiso. I had a beautiful grilled fish served over creamy hulled wheat grains called mote. It sort of has the texture of risotto, and it was fantastic. And it's really a reminder of just how diverse Latin American cuisine is. I mean, so many people in the English-speaking world, when they hear the words Latin American food, they instantly think of Mexican, and not just Mexican food, but Tex-Mex, like tacos and burritos and so on. However, this here is an example of just how diverse the food is in Latin America. Here I was at the opposite end of the continent and eating something that is so different from what many of us would associate with the term Latin American cuisine, yet equally delicious. It was so good. After lunch, more friends joined us, and we spent the afternoon wandering through the hills of Valparaiso, drinking coffee in this cool industrial-style cafe, taking in the murals, and the strange beauty of the city. And tasting Araucano, which is a bit like the Argentinian Fernet. It's a herbal liqueur which is native to the Mapuche people who are indigenous to this region. I wasn't a huge fan, to be honest. One of the most iconic parts of Valparaiso is the funicular railways. Because the city rises so sharply from the waterfront into the hills, traditional transport was never enough. So over time, more than 30 ascensores, which are funicular lifts, were built to carry people up and down the slopes. Many still survive today, some restored, others creaking along in glorious old age. They're more than just transport, they're actually part of the city's soul, and riding them feels like stepping into a bygone era, into a Valparaiso that once stood at the crossroads of the world. And by evening, the fog began to thicken, the city lights started to glow, and we headed out to sample some of Valparaiso's legendary nightlife. Our first stop was a place called the UK Bar, a British-themed pub tucked away among the hills. The sort of place that felt delightfully out of place in Chile, yet totally right in Valparaiso. From there, we headed on for more drinks and tasted piscolas, another Chilean favorite. Then we ended up at Gato en la Ventana, a bar famous for once being a haunt of artists, writers, and left-wing intellectuals. If you know anything about Chile's recent history, you'll know how significant those differences have been over the past half-century. Chile's modern history has really been shaped by struggles between the left and the right. And in a place like Valparaiso, with its bohemian, rebellious spirit, you can still feel echoes of that history in the walls, the music, and the people. As the night went on and the live music continued, people began to dance the cueca. Now, the cueca is Chile's national dance, and it is said to represent a rooster courting a hen, full of playful movement, circling, flirtation, and energy. And it was brilliant to watch. Pato and his friend Mayo were particularly good at it. I, on the other hand, remained an enthusiastic spectator. But one day I'll go back to Chile and learn properly. One day. If you're enjoying this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. And if you really love what you're seeing, please tell your family and friends about it and share it across social media. It really helps me build my YouTube channel. We finished up the night at El Canario Peña Folclórica, a dive bar where we rescued Mayo from a conversation with some dodgy guys out the front, and then we called it a night. The next morning we headed out for a day in Viña del Mar. Now, when many people think about the Pacific Ocean and the Pacific coasts around the Pacific Ocean, many people think of like Polynesian paradises, northern Australian beaches and so on. But the coastline in this part of the world and this part of the Pacific is actually very, very different. It's cooler, often cold, it's moodier, it's often more urban or completely deserted. But if there's one place in this region that really does sort of evoke that seaside glamour and elegance, it's Viña del Mar. Its name means vineyard of the sea, and for generations it's been the summer playground of Chile's wealthy and well-connected. Grand homes, gardens, beaches, casinos, and a gentler, more polished atmosphere than gritty, artistic Valparaiso next door. That morning we stopped for lunch and had cazuela, a traditional Chilean soup. It was hearty and comforting and delicious. Meat, vegetables, broth, corn, pumpkin. The sort of dish that feels like it belongs to cooler climates and mountain regions. And for me, it was just another reminder that Chile is really defined by both the sea and also the Andes. After lunch, we explored the city, passing through beautiful gardens, elegant old mansions that have been turned into art gallery and exhibition spaces, and the famous amphitheatre that hosts the Viña del Mar International Song Festival every February. Now, the Viña del Mar International Song Festival isn't just some niche song competition. This is actually a really big deal in Latin America. It sort of unites Latin America a bit like Eurovision does Europe, but it doesn't have the same cringe. Like, this is a serious song festival. Mention Viña del Mar to anyone in Latin America and they'll probably first tell you about the song festival. We continued through the city's parks and coastline, then set off on a long walk back in the direction of Concon, though not all the way because that would have been pretty ambitious. We passed beaches, oceanfront promenades, and an old industrial structure by the water that had been preserved as a monument to the city's maritime past. And once again, as evening came, we watched the sun sink into the Pacific. Oh, and by the way, pato means duck in Spanish, something that Ricardo was very happy about. That evening, we went out with Pato's family to a Peruvian restaurant nearby and celebrated the Concon edition of my 40th birthday party. There was a cake, of course, a torta vienesa. This glorious creation layered with manjar, which is the Chilean name for dulce de leche, berries, blackberry jam, and cream. Latin America really knows how to do cake well, and Chile is no exception. Once you've had cake in Latin America, nothing else quite hits the same. It was also here that I debuted the second generation of my birthday candles. Now, I feel that this is something that needs to be explained. Originally, I was planning to celebrate my 40th birthday in Pakistan, which is the place that I call home. Family and friends in Australia convinced me to celebrate it in Australia before I left for Pakistan, so I ended up organising a birthday party in Melbourne, which had a cake and candles atop it. And then I grew up in Sydney, so I also needed to have a celebration in Sydney as well, so I decided to kind of unite all of this together. I would carry the same candles to top the cake for my 3 places that I call or have called home. So the same candles atop the cake in Melbourne, in Sydney, and in Lahore. And then as I was planning the trip, I realized that I would be flying to Latin America via London, where I also have friends, and I would be touching down in Mexico, where I also know people. So sort of the idea came from that. It was like, well, if I'm going to use the same candles to have the same party in Melbourne, Sydney, and Lahore, why not extend it to my group of friends in London and Mexico? And out of that, it became obvious that I would need to do it 40 times to celebrate my 40th birthday. What I was telling everyone before I left Australia that year was I don't really want to be 40, but if I've got to be 40, I might as well do it in South America. And you know, some people don't make a huge deal of their birthdays, and that includes me actually. I mean, until my 40th, I never really had huge celebrations for my birthdays. But I decided that, again, you know, if I'm going to be 40, then I'm going to let everyone know about it and I'll drag my celebration around the world. Only one problem though, candles burned down. And it was actually, by the time I got to London, it was really early in the trip that I realized that my plan had a fatal flaw. And that was that not only the candles would burn down, but these candles that are in the shape of the numbers, I don't know if you've ever discovered this, but the wick only runs about 30% of the way down the candle. I realized that actually I would need to rethread the candles. So in London, early one morning, I went out to an arts and crafts store to buy a wick, which I would be able to use to rethread the candle. So this now became a maintenance project, and I was actually in Merida, I remember, at I think it was the Che Hostel in Merida, after my birthday celebration in Palenque with Tino and his family, that it was time to rethread the candles. So using a pair of manicure scissors that I had pulled apart, I heated up the blunt tip of one half of the scissors using the lighter that I was carrying with me, because obviously, you know, if I'm carrying birthday candles and celebrating my birthday everywhere, I need to be prepared. Using the lighter, I heated up the blunt tip of the manicure scissors and forced it through the base of the candle, twisted it and burrowed right through until I reached the top, or what had become the top of what had already burned down. I threaded the new wick through it, and then I melted the salvaged wax back down into it to make it set. With more determination than dignity, my repaired set of candles made it all the way to Chile, which interestingly was actually at about celebration number 20, so I knew that I had made it halfway. I had also prepared a contingency plan in case the candles burned all the way down before I finished my trip. And the contingency plan was a set of candles that I had also picked up in London. However, when I took them out here, I realized that there was just one problem. They were red, not the gold ones that I had originally started with in Melbourne. So with Pato, I went to a craft store in Viña del Mar and bought a gold marker. Using the half of the manicure scissors that I had used to burrow through the candles, I scraped off the red paint and then painted with the gold marker right over the top of them. Continuity matters. You know, some people waste their time on things like writing a book, changing the world, raising children. I waste my time and energy on birthday candles. The next morning, it was time to set out and explore Pato's hometown, Concon. We drove along the coast, spent time with his delightful mum, one of those instantly warm, generous people who just radiate warmth and happiness. And I could immediately see where Pato and his siblings get their warmth from. Later, we headed up to the famous Concon sand dunes. These dunes are one of the strangest and most beautiful landscapes in the region. You climb through what feels like a desert landscape of sweeping sand ridges, yet just beyond it lies the Pacific Ocean. Standing there, looking out over Valparaiso, Viña del Mar, Concon, and the coastline beyond, it felt surreal, like some kind of meeting point between Arabia and the South Pacific. Pato's niece had brought a piece of cardboard to slide down the dunes, and she gave it her best attempt. Then we all walked back to the car park and brought back half of the sand dunes in our shoes with us. That evening we headed back to Pato's house and had a family karaoke night with his sisters and their families, and it was just so much fun. We ate ostiones and machas a la parmesana, a local seafood treat, and we sang our hearts out. It was one of those things like, you know, when you're traveling, you forget about some of the monuments and the museums, but this was just so much fun, and I'll never forget this. And then the next morning, it was time for both of us to fly out of Chile. Pato would be flying back towards Australia, and I would be flying out of the country onwards to my next destination. Before we left, his mother had arranged a pastel de choclo. I'd been hoping to try this dish the whole time that I was in Chile, and on my final day, I finally did. It's one of the country's most beloved foods, a baked dish of minced meat, olives, and boiled egg, topped not with potato, but with a sweet corn mash that forms a golden crust in the oven. And it was fantastic. Slightly sweet, slightly savory, and really completely its own thing. We spent the final hours of the day out in the garden, just relaxing, enjoying the sunshine, and chatting with the family. And, you know, it was just the perfect end to my time in Chile. If you'd like to visit Concon and the region around Viña del Mar and Valparaiso, Pato and his family run a B&B there. I've linked it in the video description below. That evening, Pato and I shared the cost of a private transfer from Concon back to Santiago. There are buses from Viña del Mar and possibly Concon to Santiago, but we wanted to be dropped off at the airport, so we got the private transfer. Pato's flight departed just before midnight, and my flight out of Chile was to leave at about 5 o'clock in the morning, which meant checking in at 3 a.m. So we arrived at the airport together, I said goodbye to him, and I just hung around and waited until it was time to leave this beautiful country. The time that I spent with Pato and his family was truly unforgettable. And I mean, I say that about a lot of things in this trip, but this really was. I mean, it's burned into my memory. You guys are so beautiful, so wonderful. You welcomed me into your home, you fed me, you entertained me, you took me out to show me the region. It was just so awesome, and I have no words to explain how grateful I am. So thank you so much. I love you all, and I really hope that we can meet again soon. And, you know, it was like I've known Pato for so many years, and finally getting to see where he came from, it felt like sort of completing the circle there. It was really, really beautiful. So thank you all. But it was time to leave Chile, and that means that it's time for a rapid fire round. But before I get to that, I'm going to tell you about the charm that I got for my bracelet for Chile. Now, Chile is a very big, it's a very long and diverse country. And, you know, Chile really is, it's difficult to define in one charm, because although there are iconic things from Chile, I feel like Chile's so diverse, there's not one thing that seems to unite it, at least not in my mind anyway. You know, when I think about like the Atacama Desert in the north, and in the central region with Santiago, Valparaiso and that region, then I think about like the folklore tradition in Chiloé, the forests around Concon, and then the drama of the nature and the environment around Patagonia. There's not really one thing that stands out to me that really feels like it can unite Chile as one symbol or one charm. So in the end, I got something that I'm still not 100% sure about, and this is the only charm from any country of the 17 countries in Latin America that I visited. This is the only charm that I'm still not 100% sold on. I got an autumn leaf. Now, this sounds a little bit odd until you hear my reasoning behind it. It was in Chile that I saw some spectacular autumn leaves in the south. It also represents the forests around Concon. And it also sort of represents, I guess, like, you know, what I saw in Chiloé with the idea of spirits inhabiting nature and the environment around us. So there's that side of it. As well as that, I also felt that Chile was a bit of a turning point in my trip, because this was the point at which I was on the return to Mexico. So it was kind of going into like the autumn of the trip. I had said goodbye to Amit, I was saying goodbye to Pato, and from after Chile, I didn't really know anyone in a lot of places until I reached Mexico again. So that was really when the vibe of the trip began to change. And in the end, I chose the autumn leaf, and I showed it to someone, and they were like, oh wow, you went to Canada. Fair enough. So if you have a better idea, please let me know in the comments below. I do have some ideas, and it is something that I'm willing to replace if I go back to Chile, or when I go back to Chile again soon, hopefully. Anyway, it is time to move on. Rapid fire round for Chile. Favorite city? Now, this is difficult because for me, Chile wasn't really about the cities. I mean, if I had to choose a city, I would say Valparaiso, because it was really cool and I had a great time with Pato and his friends. However, if I was going to choose like a town, if I could extend the definition a bit, I'd probably say Concon, because it did kind of have a really cool backpacker vibe, but then it was a bit chic as well, and the views across the lake and, you know, the waterfalls up in the mountains nearby. I mean, Concon was pretty awesome. So favorite city / town, Concon. Favorite region, Chiloé. Well, I mean, I couldn't choose Concon as a region. Chiloé truly is a region, and that was really awesome. Like the stories and the folklore of the, you know, like spirits and fairies living in the wood, and the churches and the lands and everything. The stories of Caleoche, the mythical ghost ship that approaches the shore, captained by the souls of the drowned and the departed. Like, it's really intriguing. Chiloé was my favorite region. Best food? This is a controversial one because I tried some really, really good quality Chilean food, like pastel de choclo, the mote, cazuela, different Chilean dishes that were really, really like truly representations of Chile. But in the end, I'm going to go with completos. I know they're a street snack and they're not super original because it's almost like a hot dog, but they were, for me, just like the guilty pleasure, you could say, the best part of Chilean cuisine. They were so tasty. And a special mention to pisco sours as well. Controversial take. I had pisco sours in Peru, and I know that they're very commonly associated with Peru, but I preferred the ones in Chile. I know I'm probably going to have the entire nation of Peru coming for me in the comments below, and you are more than welcome to. I just found the way that in Chile, pisco sours are prepared, it's with a bit less sugar, and that was probably more suitable for my taste. Sorry, Peru. And the best experience? Look, there are a lot of contenders. I mean, stargazing in the Atacama Desert, partying in Valparaiso at nighttime, sort of sitting at the base of the Salto El León in the mountains behind Concon. That was all really amazing, but I think the standout experience has to be the Torres del Paine National Park in Patagonia. It wasn't the towns in Patagonia, it was that feeling of being surrounded by something so vast and so unreal that it almost doesn't feel like Earth. The scenery there was just on another level. Chile easily makes it into the top 3 or 4 countries that I visited on this trip. To find out the final ranking, you'll need to keep watching. And make sure that you tune in again next week, because I will be going to another country that is vastly different. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you then.